Hi, it's Katrina. From colors in your orange juice to dried out shark skin, here are 13 of the coolest things seen under a microscope. Number 13. Seawater. Looking under a microscope, seawater could probably remind you of sand. While the bits that make up seawater look a little like sand, it doesn't sound as nice. In fact, the little pieces of seawater you see under a microscope is called diatoms, a catch-all term for the various dead algae bits floating around the ocean. The bits of diatoms take different shapes, ranging from round items that could remind you of a donut to industrial waste. Furthermore, if you look closely, you might be able to see tiny creatures such as crab larvae, cyanobacteria, copepods, chaetognaths, fish eggs, and marine worms. After learning this, you probably realize there are a lot of reasons why you shouldn't swallow seawater. Number 12. Shark skin. The skin of a shark is quite unusual when you view it under a microscope. While it looks gray and similar to any other skin of a sea creature, it is actually made up of very unique scales that people often compare to teeth. In fact, a shark's skin is covered in millions of microscopic denticles, rigid tooth-like scales that jut out from the soft skin beneath. By disrupting the flow of water over the fish's skin, it is believed that the denticles reduce drag, making for a more efficient swimmer. It also helps them to eat anything as easily as possible. It is also said that once shark skin is dried out, it can be used to file softer materials such as wood. Let me know if this is true or not because I've never heard this before. Number 11. Chalk. While chalk is not as popular or as common as it used to be, it's an interesting item to see under a microscope. It probably looks different from what you would imagine. When you use chalk, it pretty much turns into a powder, which would make you think under a microscope it might look like sand or a mountain of powdered sugar. However, it looks much different. Up close and personal, chalk actually looks like a million little soccer balls made out of little pieces of bones. These little balls are actually the shells of dead microscopic organisms like foraminifera mixed with corpses of sea algae. Kind of darker than you expected, huh? Number 10. Sand. If you have not had the chance to look at sand under a microscope, what are you waiting for? While sand might just look brown underneath your feet as you're walking on a beach, under a microscope it is a completely different story. Sand actually looks like several little tiny pieces of unique rocks and shells. In fact, one little bit of sand can show a different variety of tiny treasures, with each item having its own shape and color. You might see a mix of what looks like seashells, crystals, and different colored rocks. Sand can be so fascinating under a microscope that a man by the name of Dr. Gary Greenberg has spent decades collecting sand from various parts of the world, studying it under a microscope, and writing a book about his findings. He states that sand composition can vary drastically depending on where it is located. Dr. Greenberg also says that through his studies, he has found out that conditions such as temperature, marine environment, and surf conditions contribute to what type of rocks are found in the sand. Number 9. Alcoholic drinks. Alcoholic beverages under a microscope could be compared to works of splattered paint. You have to kind of stop and stare to figure out what it is, and also to admire the beauty of the color combinations. That is if you like modern art, otherwise you can just skip this. Several pictures of alcoholic drinks have been studied by Florida State University's chemistry department. BevShot's founder Lester Hutt explains the pictures by stating, "What you can see in the magnified pictures are the crystallized carbohydrates that have become sugars and glucose." He further explains that looking at any alcoholic drink under a microscope takes weeks, as they need to dry out the droplets of these drinks before they can go under a microscope for their photo shoot. Hutt explains that they can easily take about 200 pictures before the right picture is taken of the droplet. And now for number 8, but first be sure to subscribe before you leave. We're almost at 1 million subscribers. Number 8, butterfly wings. When you look at a butterfly out in the world, you notice the different colors they have on their wings. Well, when you look at a butterfly wing under a microscope, you won't be disappointed because they also show various colors and shapes. Photographer Lyndon Geldhill has taken several pictures of butterfly wings under a microscope, catching all the beauty for the world to see. Some of these pictures look like images of clouds speeding through the sky, or painting waves in the ocean like Bob Ross, or like dozens of duck footprints painted blue and brown. Through his work, Geldhill has learned that every time you look at a butterfly wing under a microscope, it is a surprise because you cannot predict what the pattern will look like from looking at the butterfly with your naked eye. Butterfly wings are made of very thin layers of a hardened protein called chitin, which is also what your fingernails and toenails are made of. On top of the layers of chitin are microscopic scales, which are the source of the stunning colors in the photographs. Number 7. Dust. You might be surprised that dust might look a bit more interesting and less frustrating under a microscope, although maybe a little terrifying if you're a clean freak. Through studies, it can be shown that dust takes a bit of a different appearance under a microscope, depending on where it came from. For example, dust that collects from textile fibers actually has a stringy and colorful look to it. However, the most common type of dust, household dust, has a combination of little bits of items. This dust can hold things like starch grains, which looks like little circles with crosses, white fibers, which are known as paper fibers, and flat, colorless particles that are also human skin flakes. If you are unlucky, you might see some microscopic critters you would rather not see close up. In a nutshell, dust is made out of a lot of different items, animals, and people from around your household. Number 6. Soy sauce. While you're pouring it over your rice at your favorite Chinese restaurant, you probably aren't thinking about what it looks like under a microscope. Or probably most things, you just eat it and enjoy it. But soy sauce under a microscope is quite stunning. In fact, soy sauce might remind you of golden crystals. So many people think that soy sauce is so beautiful under a microscope that an image by Yanping Wang from the Beijing Planetarium won 10th place out of over 2,000 images. A vivid description of soy sauce is that it looks like an overhead view of a futuristic city amidst a crimson desert, with howling demon and skull spirits floating around scaring up salty flavor. Think of that the next time you have it. Number 5. Toilet paper. When you first view toilet paper under a microscope, you might wonder why it feels so soft, at least the good kind, because the pictures will not portray a soft fabric. Instead, the pictures show what looks like torn up strings or fabric or shredded paper when you dump out the remains of your paper shredder. Looking at the image, you might also wonder how toilet paper stays together when it looks like a shredded mess. However, it can also make you realize why toilet paper decomposes the way it does when it gets wet. Number 4. Snowflakes. For those of you who live where there is a lot of snow, you're probably tired of hearing about this. While snow falling often looks like white, fluffy little cotton balls, it actually looks similar to how we draw snowflakes. They look like little crystal cutouts, and each snowflake you can view under a microscope has its own shape and size. In fact, snowflakes are beautiful to so many people under a microscope. They have several professional fans, such as a physicist named Ken Libreck, who has learned when you can find the prettiest crystal snowflakes. Ken has stated that the most beautiful crystals usually fall when the temperature is between 5 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit. He also states you need to capture them as they are falling, because once they hit the ground, they actually lose a bit of their shape. It is a very precise science looking at snowflakes. I don't know how to keep it from melting before you can see it. Number 3. Vinyl record. If you want a better look at how vinyl records are played, looking at the groove of a vinyl record under a microscope will make it all seem clearer. The images show the groove where the needle sits, which is between two waves of channel. One channel is simply known as the right channel, and the other the left channel. More scientifically, the stylus, or the needle, is vibrated by the grooves on the LP, which moves magnets placed near a coil. The coil in turn generates electricity, which gets amplified into an audio signal. In fact, vinyl enthusiast Ben Krasnow has taken this all a step further by creating a stop-motion video of the needle moving through a record's grooves, explaining how he used his electron microscope to image the record. Number 2. Salt. In some pictures, you can see how salt looks like a Mayan pyramid under a microscope. Salt tends to have a wonderful, distinctive crystal form. Salt crystals clearly look cubic, even though some of the grains seem to be made up of overlapping cubes. According to science, this happens because of salt's composition. When a number of salt's molecules get together to form a crystal, they tend to arrange themselves in a cubic pattern. In fact, if you break a salt crystal, it will tend to break along the planes that are at the surfaces of the planes of the atomic lattice to create a nice, shiny crystal face. Sugar also looks like a crystal, but more of like a broken pillar than a cube. Number 1. Orange juice. When you look at orange juice under a microscope, you probably would not know what it is unless you were told. Orange juice, like alcoholic drinks, can have the colorful art-type look to it. However, orange juice looks more like colored broken glass, which makes you wonder if you could actually drink it. In fact, through a microscope, orange juice only contains the slightest hint of orange, with other colors ranging from purple to blue to green to pink. The popular picture is courtesy of BevShots, who magnify dried droplets of various drinks and then photograph the results. So now, the next time you take a drink from your morning orange juice, you might see all kinds of other colors. Thanks for watching and have fun with your microscopes! Be sure to subscribe and I'll see you next time. Bye!